Emit, please. I'll tell you.
Okay, I just have one administrative question. Will this be recorded or?
Will be on YouTube, yeah.
Okay, on YouTube, so it's a direct transmission. And may I ask for not to be recorded, perhaps?
Şebnem Hocam, we are ready.
Okay, I'm starting then. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this session. Thank you for attending. There will be two presenters in this session. The first presenter is Orzalia Milian. Sorry. She has a degree in English language and literature and Hungarian language and literature from Obezboyo University, Cluj-Napoca, Romania. She completed her PhD at the University of Szeged, Hungary in 2010, entitled Fiction of Egg Phrases, Theoretical, Historical, and Disciplinary Realignments in Theoretical Discourses on Egg Phrases. She is a senior lecturer at the Department of Visual Culture and Literature Theory, University of Szeged, Hungary. She is the author of several articles and 2 books published in Hungarian, Visual Figurative Speech and Transgressions. Her research interests include word and image studies, intermediality, narratology, contemporary Hungarian literature, and the interrelations between popular music and film. Yes, the floor is yours, Orzalia.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm really glad to for getting the possibility of presenting at this beautifully organized conference. Thank you very much for all the collaborators and the organizers, and hopefully I will be able to share my screen. I have a couple of slides. Okay, get back to that. Sorry. Screen. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes, there's no problem.
Okay, great. So, okay, obviously this is still a kind of work in progress. So first I will give a couple of words on the question of modern slavery, and then I will focus on the description and the short analytical sketch of 2 contemporary Hungarian films, which will be Beast, directed by Attila Till in 2011, and Woman Capture, directed by Bernadette Tuzeriter in 2017. And I will also give a sketch of my conclusion, which will be developed in the written version of this paper. So, one of the reasons why we discuss and debate film violence maybe because it facilitates discussions about social and cultural issues that are otherwise concealed within the social order of democracies. Filmic representations of violence can reveal what is otherwise hidden or repressed in society. Though the many forms of modern slavery affect millions of people across the world, and many narrative feature films or documentary films focus on this subject, film studies scholarship is still scarce on it. For this reason, my paper aims at examining the cinematic representations of modern slavery and the forms of violence as depicted in 2 contemporary Hungarian films, that is Beast and The Woman Captured. Both films focus on cases of domestic slavery, death slavery, and exploitation for forced labor, depicting the perpetrators' techniques of physical violence and psychological abuse, which break the will and identity of the victims. Modern slavery covers a set of specific legal concepts, including forced labor, debt bondage, forced marriage, other slavery, and slavery-like practices, and human trafficking. Essentially, modern slavery refers to situations of exploitation, that a person cannot refuse or leave because of threats, violence, coercion, deception, and abuse of power. Nowadays, slavery appears to be undergoing a so-called Renaissance in Hungary. Recently, it has been estimated that approximately 40,000 people may be living under such conditions in Hungary, which is a huge number because Hungary is a really small country with approximately 9 million inhabitants. Many of these 40,000 people are in forced labor in the private economy and in debt bondage, in which personal debt is used to forcibly obtain labor. According to sociological studies, the largest share of adults who were in forced labor were domestic workers. Most victims of forced labor suffer multiple forms of coercion from employers as a way of preventing them from being able to leave the situation. Some of them have their wages withheld or are prevented from leaving by threats of non-payment of due wages, which may be followed by threats of violence or acts of physical violence and psychological abuse. In many cases, the perpetrators buy the victims cheaply from middlemen and then force them to work in inhuman conditions to fully serve their family. The above-mentioned two contemporary Hungarian films, The Beast and The Woman Captured, represent abusive situations and behavior. While Beast is a fictional short film and The Woman Captured is predominantly an observational documentary, which will in the end turn out to be a performative one, both films offer harrowing narratives of contemporary slavery. While both well-meaning directors, Attila Till and Bernadett Tuzaritter, are driven by a humanitarian principle that is to draw the viewers and perhaps policymakers' attention to what is otherwise hidden in Hungarian society, only the director of A Woman Captured, that is Bernadett Tuzaritter, succeeds in avoiding the ethical and cinematic representational pitfalls inherent in filmic representations of violence. Both films are sensitive to contemporary social problems and they intend to steer clear from alarmist sensationalism or creating spectacles of suffering. Due to its lack of a larger socioeconomic context and its abundance in graphic depiction of violence and torture as compared to its 20 minutes long running time, in the end, Beast, Attila Till's film, fails to avoid the sensationalistic representation of the events and becomes borderline exploitative in its handling of the subject matter of modern slavery. Okay, and now I will give a sketch, an overview of the narrative of The Beast, and I will focus on the representation of modern slavery in this narrative short film. The 20 minutes long narrative short film Beast is a dark tale about a hard-up farmer who keeps one of his farmhands as a slave. The hero of the film is István Balog, who lives on a farm in the Hungarian countryside with his wife, teenage daughter, and two teenage sons. For more than half a year, the mentally retarded Feri has also lived with them. István Balog had bought Feri, that is the serf or slave, for 50,000 forints, that is approximately 150 euros. And Feri works for food. He sleeps in the barn, he only gets food if he behaves obediently, while his owner detains his identity card. The boy dreams of being able to dance in a night scene. He dances as a bird, as a strong reference to his desire for freedom. And once he also escapes, but István Balog brings him back and punishes him by beating him rather severely. The perpetrator, the so-called owner of the slave, runs a large farm. He keeps animals, grows vegetables and fruits. He doesn't have time to relax, and he works out his weariness and aggression on his family. He's a man who interprets the law according to his own taste. Sin cries out for revenge only if he is the victim. He commits domestic violence at his own will towards his family, mainly his wife and his daughter. But Feri is the primary subject of subjugation and violence in this short movie, whom István may or may not beat to death at the end of the film. In the closing scene, the arriving police officers find István Balog digging a ditch, but we do not see the dead body of Feri. Thus, the film has an open ending. Beast does not focus on the victim, but on the perpetrator and his animalistic brutality, and it slowly discloses that the perpetrator, in a sense, is a prisoner as well. He's a prisoner of deep poverty and a bleak, hopeless, unhappy life, where the struggle for material goods or survival destroys his moral sense to the last beat. István Balog dominates the screen all the time. His increasing cruelty is both frightening and disturbing, and in the big dramatic scene where he brutally beats Feri with a stick, the beastly temper erupts from him with an uncontrollable force. Given that the cinematic representation of such an extreme situation requires considerable artistic effort, it can hardly be underestimated that the plot world of Beast seems realistic from head to toe. We are watching a colorful, fragrant, lively rural farm world, a family made up of flesh and blood people. The poisonous, abusive environment is depicted with exemplary rhythm, precise dialogues, and careful camera work. However, while István Balog's many economic and family problems undoubtedly rationalize his anger and constant unpleasant mood, Attila Til's film does not give a precise context and does not offer a meaningful interpretation of his protagonist's unbridled aggression or the phenomenon of modern slavery. Rather, Beast talks about the outbreak of fatal aggression and the lusts of cruelty or even sadism, and the fact that such atrocities are rampant in the world. In spite of all the virtues of this short film, instead of a socially responsible problem film, we see a representation of the brutal lives led in the Hungarian countryside. In the end, in short, in a nutshell, to put it in a nutshell, in the end, the film remains a sensationalistic journalistic essay on modern slavery. And now, the second filmic example. It seems scarcely possible to make a documentary in the open about someone being worked as a slave. However, in A Woman Captured, Hungarian filmmaker Bernadett Uzariter shows in almost full view the exhaustion of being entrapped as a slave and what it takes to get out of it. A Woman Captured deals with extremely important social problems with an activist, vigorous approach freed from the bondage of documentary conventions. Maris, you see her on the right side of the slide. Maris is the captured woman of the film title, but as the director makes clear near the beginning of the film, she is far from the only victim of contemporary slavery. The A in the title of A Woman Captured is very telling, since it indicates that many others around the world are equally oppressed, exploited, and abused. A Woman Captured is a story of one woman's dangerous beat for freedom, empowered by a documentary maker without whom she would have remained entrapped. Maris has been an unpaid domestic worker for a woman named Etta, the perpetrator, for more than a decade. Aged 53, but looking at least 25 years older, Maris has been separated from her family and friends and stripped of her possessions and dignity. Psychologically broken, she is all facial lines, skinny bones, and utter resignation when we first see her in the film. For 11 years, Maris has been under the thumb of Etta, the domineering matriarch of a middle-class family, performing all manner of backbreaking household duties 7 days a week in exchange only for meals, cigarettes, and the couch to sleep on. Maris has to account for every single moment of her life, and she has been forced to take out loans on behalf of the family. She additionally holds down a part-time factory job, the wages from which also go directly to her so-called owner, to Etta. In the 18 months during which the director follows her, Maris's confidence grows and her awareness of the brutality of Etta and her family becomes stronger and more intolerable. Etta and her family are only heard off screen. It was a condition of their agreeing to the film being made, but this representational technique lends them an even more sinister air. They are hard taskmasters with voices from outside of the frame. And mostly we are left to imagine what these monsters must look like. Tuza Ritter only shows images of the perpetrators in close-ups, and we see in the close-ups only the hands or sometimes the shadows of the perpetrators. So we don't exactly have an image of the perpetrators here. So Etta's face is never shown on the screen, but the way that Tuza Ritter shoots her perfectly manicured, claw-like hands and includes carefully selected audio material of the woman speaking to Maris off camera, paints in itself an extraordinary portrait of present-day monstrosity. Etta, who is never seen on screen but maintains a chilling vocal presence, gladly accepts approximately $370 per month from Tuza Ritter to enter her home and film Maris at close quarters for a 3-month period. This is how the director, who is also a cameraman, meets Maris almost by accident. The film's focus is unrelentingly on Maris, that is the victim. Despite the nightmare of her situation, she is stripped of her possessions, she is forced into unpaid labor and with no friends or family. Maris is pragmatic, frank, and somehow through it all remarkably funny. She is a really smart and sharp woman. For a brief time, as we watch the physical strain and emotional drain of Maris's daily routine, we fear that the camera is merely doubling down on the exploitation of a 21st century serf or modern slave who pines for the teenage daughter that Etta drove from the home some years ago. In the early parts of the film, the filmmaker is apparently unaware of the phenomenon of modern-day slavery, displaying a kind of naivety while watching Maris's life through the camera. However, as the film progresses, Maris shares more and more personal information with the director, and she realizes what's really going on here. As a bond forms between the two women, the director's presence in the film grows less passive and evolves into a plan of action after Tuza Ritter, against Maris's wishes, contacts the police to report the abuse, but only to be strugglingly waved away. Maris's journey is closely linked to the developing friendship between the two women, so the victim of the abuse and the director of the film, and their questions of trust. Maris trusts Tuza Ritter to tell her story, but she trusts her with her life as well. In the film's final third, she will be able to break for liberty, accompanied, helped, and encouraged by Tuza Ritter, and she will be able to reconnect with her daughter and her newborn grandson. So from this respect, A Woman Captured is a success narrative, is a successful liberation story. Okay, and I will get to my closing paragraph, which would be a short comparison of the two films. The representation of violence in The Beast occurs predominantly through the use of images of overt personal physical violence, as well as, to a lesser extent, images and sounds of psychological abuse. As opposed to Beast, A Woman Captured emphasizes the idea of violence as a profound psychological and physical violation, rather than as a superficial bodily assault. The film uses an elusive but factual mode of representation of violence, while Beast stages an abundance of violent acts in a graphic or mimetic, though fictional mode of representation. Even if the depictions of violence in Beast, shocking in their detail, accurately reflect the experiences and horrors suffered by victims, and the intention of the director can be morally justified, that is, to draw the viewer's attention to the social problem of modern slavery, due to its focus on the perpetrator and his brutality, the film becomes sensationalistic and exploitative. A Woman Captured also makes it clear that the perpetrator, that is Eta's habitual verbal unpleasantness towards her domestic slave, has crossed over into physical abuse too, but violence in this film is kept just off screen and is predominantly suggested by capturing the abusive atmosphere or context itself. It is the relentless nature of the violence, the non-stop presence of its threat that makes the film seem way much more violent and disturbing than the representation of violence in Beast. Thus, Woman Captured offers a more effectively moving portrait of modern slavery than The Beast. And that would be my last sentence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Orselya. Thank you for your enlightening presentation, actually. Unfortunately, we don't have our second speaker with us, so we should move on to answer and questions section. Yes, we are waiting for your questions. We are waiting for your questions for Orselya. You can type your questions if you like. Let's wait a little bit.
Okay.
Yes, we are waiting for your questions still. Yes, there seems to be no question or so. Yeah, do you want to make any addition for your speech or your presentation?
No, thank you. Thanks for the possibility. I guess I will send you the written version of it. I guess it was a little bit hard to follow, a little bit difficult to follow because maybe many of the listeners haven't seen the films. So I
You
guess
say it's natural.
yeah. So and I concentrated on them, so it's probably made it a little bit hard to follow the train of thought.
Okay, thank you, Orselya. I want to thank you and audience in the session, and I will close this session. Thank you for your attendance and participation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.